My job is to kind of set the scene for you, look at some of the issues in a very general aspect, and relate them to where we're going with the rest of the conference. So what I've tried to do here is, in a very general way, put my ideas in kind of a simple format. I find that sometimes the simple tools are the nice ones that help us focus. So I've put together a small mind map of some of the issues that came to my mind as I went through looking at some of the past STAR conferences and the topics that are being presented this time. And so I'm just going to kind of go around these different aspects coming out of the conference, the different topics, and some of them our previous speakers have already pointed on. But just to bring it all together here, the goal itself of APEC is to sustain the growth and development of the region for the common good, to enhance the gains of both regional and world economy by encouraging the flows of goods, services, capital, and technology, to develop and strengthen the open multilateral trading system in the area and with all other economies, and finally to reduce the barriers in trade, goods and services, and minimize hindrance to investments among the participants. Now this is the overall APEC objective. Within that is the STAR groups. Mainly, you are here to help assist achieving those overall goals by creating a secure trade environment. And to create this environment in conjunction with the other supranational organizations such as the World's Customs Organization. So if we keep that in mind, I think we have some very high-level goals to achieve and to continue to achieve, especially given last year's achievements so far in the previous STAR conferences. So the goals continue. I've just put up a few just to give you an idea of the World's Customs Organization, their objectives, and again to keep them in mind as these are worldwide and not just APEC focused. So, establishing standards that provide supply chain security to enable integrated supply chain management, to strengthen networking arrangements between customs administrations, enhancing the capabilities of those administrations, continuing to promote cooperation between the customs organizations and the businesses that are shipping their goods around the world, and to champion the seamless movements of goods. Again, without hindrance is the key focus here, I think. One of the other things I've always tried to point out to our students at the Cass Business School is that they are not just working for their own individual business. Within that business, there are other stakeholders that are going to be affected. So again, the stakeholders involved here include our society in general. If we don't achieve the objectives that we're setting forward, what's going to happen to society? What's going to happen to our industry if barriers can grow? What about the governments? Are their objectives going to be achieved? And finally, the transport firms who are all involved in moving the goods from one nation to another. Again, all have desires that may be in contradiction to each other, but all must be satisfied to some degree. So my thought is here, what happens if one group is not satisfied? Many of you will be familiar with the pest analysis. Again, a very simple tool, once again, to bring us together here. I'll start with the political. Obviously, the APEC group is now up to 21 nations, all working together for common goals. At the same time, these 21 nations all have individual goals. In the world, there are 195 nations. Again, some may say there may be a few more or less, depending on who is making the count, but 195 is close enough. So that means 174 are not members of APEC that may have, again, other goals in mind. And right now there are 158 active free trade agreements in goods and services globally. Again, there were others. Some of these are bilateral agreements, others are in larger groups, such as the European Community, such as NAFTA, and so on. Again, all of these free trade agreements have specific goals that may or may not be in line with the APEC goals. Okay, as Mr. Caponier had mentioned, some of the economic aspects of APEC, representing 2 billion people, 42% of the world's population, a major influence, I would say. 43% of the world's land area, and in terms of economics, almost half of the total merchandise exports. And I know that's an old number, but it continues to grow. Socially, the APEC nations are what I would say quite diverse. So a lot of this in the social aspect can lead to misunderstanding and divergent goals. But I think the key for all of us and why we're here is that we can focus on the common ground between all of our nations. And finally, the technological aspects, that there continue to be advancements in detection technologies. Again, I'm obviously focusing on the security sides of things. Increases in computing power continue to grow, increases in networking, the speed of transmission in terms of intercomputer, the internet and so on, when dial-up computing no longer exists, that we're all using broadband, and that broadband continues to get faster and faster. Therefore, the ability to share information is easier than ever. Again, technologically, socially we may not want to share the information, but technologically we're able to do that more and more. Other technologies, for example, conventional X-ray, may be at its current limits, that it cannot detect everything, every risk that is out there. So we have to look at alternatives, and that this new detection equipment must be developed. And the things that were concepts in the past can become reality in the near future. Moving to a second type of analysis, the SWOT analysis, would look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the strengths of this group getting together is that all of the countries involved have to some level created and committed legislation to combat the threats. For example, the Public Law 110-53, which is basically the 9/11 bill in the U.S., has estimated that $13.1 billion will be spent in the next 5 years just for the air cargo security. Not all from the government, but total investment. Another example is that for last year's APEC conference, Qantas spent 250 million Australian dollars just for their security for the conference. So all of your countries are continuing to invest, continuing to support you in this aspect. In terms of weaknesses, what I've been able to see is that we tend to be reacting or reactive to emerging threats. It's hard to get ahead of what the bad guys are planning. We can react once something has happened. A lot of the current technologies are at their limits and therefore will be unable to be as useful in the future as new threats continue to develop. And the final one that I've already had a couple discussions just in the hallway with people is that while we may be able to screen 100% of cargo, it may not be 100% effective, as we're trying to put more of it through the system and just check the box that we've screened it. How effectively was a different story. So there are some weaknesses. At least we're aware of them. The opportunities on the plus side. Again, we are all here looking to create these opportunities, to become more proactive, to think ahead, to better utilize our assets. Money is getting tighter and tighter with the global credit crunch. Governments want better use of their funds. Industry wants better use of their funds. So we can utilize those assets more effectively. We have the ability to create what I will say threat adaptive security rather than a one-size-fits-all, everyone goes through the same process. If we identify the threat, we can adapt the security to it. And finally, the opportunity to share information on a wider scale. That networks are able to be secured, that we can share this information. We're beginning to do so, as was mentioned earlier, the customs organizations sharing data with the biometric passports, knowing instantly if any passport from any country is valid. But that can continue with cargo data as well. Finally, threats. And I didn't put a lot here because I think we're all aware that the threats, I think, are continuing to grow. There may be less in terms of numbers, but the actual threat of any one event happening may become greater. And the other threat is that the tactics of the terrorists or of any other group trying to circumvent our rules are changing. That the methods of 1 year ago, of 5 years ago, are no longer the methods that the terrorists are using. So we have to be aware of that and become proactive before they're allowed to make their changes. The threats are not just terrorism, as you're aware. It goes into cargo crime as another factor. In the U.S. alone, $10 to $25 billion is being stolen. The U.S. Department of Defense has $1 billion a year in terms of pilferage. Small-scale theft of items taken 1, 2 at a time. But $1 billion a year just from the U.S. Department of Defense. Piracy had 263 attacks in 2007. And when it comes to counterfeiting, so that you know you're wearing that Nike outfit to know that it is actually a Nike outfit and not a Nike without the E at the end, $705 billion. Here's the IMB's live piracy map from last week. Again, quite a few incidents showing up throughout the world. So, we're living in a place that has a lot of safety and security issues going on. And now, obviously, that then leads to why we are here this week, to try to create solutions. And some of those sessions that are coming in the next, later today and tomorrow, look extremely interesting. I'm glad to be here to participate because we're going to look at some of these issues as to which technologies work. whether isolated or integrated systems are better for any specific purpose. Again, changing our mindset towards security. The human factor is one of the sessions. The business folks are really here. Can proper security actually reduce costs? And I'm actually working with a group, a commercial group, that's developing a security system, and the initial estimates are that even with the cost of the system, if it can reduce things like the pilferage and theft, you're talking about saving up to $14 billion a year. And so if the cost of the system, which we think is less than $300-400 million to any one group, this is a very good return on investment. But it's always hard to convince losses that haven't happened versus actual money out of your pocket. And finally, is harmonized security across the APEC region possible? Complete harmonization, again, a single set of rules that all companies are able to follow, and again, with this goal of keeping goods flowing without hindering the level of trade, keeping our businesses in fashion so that they can earn their profits to keep employment levels in all of our countries up. So, I've kind of given you a very quick overview, I think, just some little topics to think about as we progress through today and tomorrow, and I thank you for your kind attention.